Welcome to The Explainer. So, today we're diving into a really provocative text. Its whole argument that modern populism hasn't just challenged core Christian ideals, it's completely killed them.
All right, let's just jump right in. And fair warning, the source material here, it does not pull any punches. The language is incredibly strong right from the get-go. It's not wasting any time, just immediately laying out its main, super aggressive claim that all the public talk about faith and modern populism is just a cover for an agenda that's actually fundamentally anti-Christian.
So to even begin to build this case, the text first has to set the stage. It needs to define its terms, right? So it lays out what it sees as the three core, non-negotiable teachings of Jesus. First up is charity. And what's kind of fascinating here is how the author frames this. They don't go for this soft, religious language. Nope, they call it a commie vibe. And they do that to really hammer home this idea of a radical, all-in commitment to the poor and a complete rejection of hoarding personal wealth. Next, we've got peace. And the source boils this down to one really powerful idea. This philosophy of non-retaliation, of forgiveness. Turn the other cheek. And you'll see how this contrasts so sharply with what it describes later on as a culture of just pure aggression. And the third ideal? Equality. The argument from the author here is that the original Christian message was all about tearing down social hierarchies. The text points out that Jesus deliberately hung out with society's outcasts. We're talking prostitutes, tax collectors, lepers, to make it crystal clear what he was about.
Okay, so we've got the ideal, right? The three core virtues. Now let's get into the meat of the argument and see how the source pits these ideals against what it calls the populist reality.
First up, charity versus hoarding. The argument here is pretty blunt. The command to give to the poor is in a direct head-to-head collision with this "fuck you, I got mine" attitude. An attitude that, according to the source, celebrates piling up extreme wealth, where the term free market is basically just code for "let me get mine." So, here's the absolute crucial point. According to this text, faith itself has been repurposed. It's not about helping the poor anymore. Instead, it's become, and this is a direct quote, a fortress that's used to defend and even justify greed. And the text does the exact same thing with the ideal of peace. It puts it right up against what the author describes as a movement just constantly fueled by outrage and targeted hate. The source points to stuff like religious symbols showing up at political riots as like the ultimate, most glaring contradiction you could possibly imagine. And check this out, because what's so clever here is how the source starts using religious language against itself. It takes these core religious concepts and completely reframes them. The argument is that powerful emotions like hate and envy have basically taken the place of grace and communion. They've become the new Holy Spirit, the central driving forces of the whole movement. And for the last one, the source puts radical equality up against what it just calls supremacy. The author's claim is that hiding behind all this populist talk of common sense is a really rigid social hierarchy, a pecking order, that is the complete opposite of that original Christian message about lifting up the people on the margins. Okay, so this begs a pretty big question, right? If these contradictions are so obvious, so stark, like the author says, then why are these movements so popular? Well, the text has a very direct and pretty cynical explanation. So what's the answer then? According to the source, it all comes down to a mechanism that's built on a few key, let's say, drivers. The source basically lays this all out as an engine that runs on human desperation. It says populism gets its start by preying on people who are vulnerable. And once it has them, it swaps out real faith for just constant paranoia. It gets people to distrust everything, the government, science, even their own neighbors. And the end result of all this, the argument goes, is that you get unshakable loyalty to one leader. And you ultimately turn your followers into what the text just calls rage machines. And this is where the source makes its most extreme, its most provocative claim. It draws a direct line that is absolutely meant to shock you. The text says, look, if you break down the core ideas of this populist reality we're talking about, the focus on racial purity, the worship of a strongman leader, crushing the weak, well, those things actually line up better with the principles of fascism from Hitler's Mein Kampf than they do with the teachings of Jesus. The implication is huge. This isn't just a political difference of opinion, it's a complete 180-degree ideological flip. So, all of this is building up to the author's final, absolutely damning verdict on the whole relationship between modern populism and the faith it says it represents. And the source wraps it up with its most graphic and provocative metaphor of all. The point isn't just that faith is dead, the argument is that populism is, in the author's view, actively well, desecrating its corpse and twisting its ideals into something you can't even recognize anymore. So, if you want to boil it all down, the central thesis of this source is that the entire purpose of the religion has been flipped on its head. Something that was supposed to be a unifying force for all of humanity has been turned into a weapon, a tool used specifically to create and enforce division.
So what we're left with is a powerful and honestly a pretty unsettling argument. And it leaves us with a final question to think about. Is what this author is describing the total destruction of a faith, or is it the evolution of that faith into something completely new and different?